another minute to join, but thanks to you all who are so very prompt. We'll just sit tight for a minute and be back with you shortly. Welcome to those who have just joined. We'll be starting in about 1 minute. Just want to give people a chance to click on their link and get settled and join us. So hang tight for just a tad more. All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Katie Stanton. I'm Programming and Operations Director for the Urban Manufacturing Alliance. Before we dive into today's great program, I'd like to just take a moment and have each of you think a little bit about that topic today, which is partnering to build race-conscious manufacturing training programs, and put it in your own context. So how is your own organization or your community working towards racial equity? Are you partnering with other organizations? Who are you learning from and with? Who is being centered in your work? And as you feel inspired, we'd love for you to post what you're thinking and doing in the chat, both in this moment right now and then throughout the session, just to get a sense of some of the work that you all are engaging in. So as you're thinking about that and getting ready to hear from our presenters, I just want to quickly go through today's agenda. Eva, if you could go to the next slide, please. First, we'll be hearing some short rapid share style presentations from 4 individuals who are a part of our industry and inclusion cohort or who serve on the program's advisory board. Then we'll be going into a moderated discussion, which will include questions from you. So if you could please type your questions into the Q&A, we will be sure to get to those during the last portion of the event. So feel free to enter those at any time throughout the program. And then we'll just hear some quick closing remarks. Eva, you can go to the next slide, please. So before I hand it over to those presenters, I just want to offer a quick refresher on who UMA is and what this program that we've been doing in partnership with the Century Foundation is. The Urban Manufacturing Alliance is a national ecosystem of manufacturing practitioners who work together to grow more equitable economies and cities by building sustainable and inclusive urban manufacturing sectors. We believe that manufacturing is a wealth building strategy for communities, whether it's through production jobs that are tied to career pathways like management, even ownership, and of course, entrepreneurship. And we work with our coalition of over 900 partners across about 250 cities to remove barriers to those jobs, to ownership, to entrepreneurship, so that we can create more prosperous communities and neighborhoods through urban manufacturing. And it's through these partnerships and the trust that we've collectively built that UMA is able to convene practitioners and intermediaries to learn from one another, to build a network of people who can rely on each other to address challenges and think through ideas, and so that we can lift up what works for others to learn from and to see, like we're doing today. And that goal of collaboration is what drove UMA's partnership with the Century Foundation and the Lumina Foundation to create our industry and inclusion cohort. So this is a group of 8 workforce development organizations across 6 cities who are building racially conscious workforce training programs to train youth and adults for a variety of manufacturing careers. And we spent the last year together online, all virtually, learning about each other's models, sharing ideas, and digging into important questions around the intersection of technology, credentialing, manufacturing, training, racial equity, collaboration, et cetera. And so in the next few months, we are wrapping up now. So UMA and Century Foundation will be sharing our process, our findings, and suggestions for replication in the near future. But two things of many that really stood out from the work for us is that first, no one of these organizations is tackling these complex challenges alone. They have deep ties to community and have formed a true network of partners that they and their trainees can rely on. And that's why we're here today to talk about those. And second, that partnerships between communities and manufacturing companies are the most effective strategy to build a skilled and diverse workforce. But that establishing these partnerships isn't always easy, and it takes a lot of effort and time and communication and intentionality from both sides. And again, that's where our cohort and our advisory board members have really been able to step in. And so the folks that you'll hear from today are building these training programs that enable community members, residents to get the skills they need to find those open family sustaining jobs, ultimately building back the middle class communities of color that have been wiped out by structures like globalization and systemic racism. So this is our final webinar for the Industry Inclusion Cohort, and I don't want to take any more of your time. So I'm going to go and hand it over to Andrew Stettner, who's Senior Policy Fellow at the Century Foundation, to give you some additional context for our cohort. Andy?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. The Century Foundation, we're a national public policy think tank. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and we're very excited to be here as part of our organization's focus on building an equitable economy, which we believe revitalizing manufacturing must be at the center of. We started this project really in 2017 with our High Wage America tour. We went across the industrial Midwest, meet with leaders like Senator Sherrod Brown in Cleveland and former state senator Alice Walker in Chicago. And what we heard from those communities that had suffered from deindustrialization is they weren't looking backward to the past with woe, but rather to the future with hope for industry. And that hope was being realized. Manufacturing has come back from the depths of the Great Recession, adding millions of jobs and getting an increased focus right now as we are producing vital medical supplies for fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. But this revitalization is taking place in a radically changed workforce that is aging. There's as many as 2.4 million workers needed in manufacturing in the next decade, and a workforce that is technology is fundamentally altering. Industrial robots in manufacturing, their use doubled over the last decade, and that really is just the beginning. So next slide. So along with Urban Manufacturing Alliance and our longtime partners on the call today, Jobs of America, we are working to try to seize this moment to build back manufacturing as a tool to meet national needs and also to drive a more equitable economy. The President Biden is right there along with us in his Build Back Better plan and already moving aggressively with executive orders around our supply chain and Buy America requirements and new grant programs to help more people of color take advantage of opportunities in manufacturing. And our goal on the policy side is to inform how this administration and Congress can get the policy and partnerships right and how corporations and communities can join in towards this drive. Next slide. So I just want to say thank you to this wonderful cohort of leaders, those who are with us today and have been with us over the last year by Zoom. And you can see they span from our cohort from Baltimore to Milwaukee and our advisory board from coast to coast. We have gained tremendously from their knowledge, and we hope to continue working with them to elevate their voices within this sector, within our educational institutions, and within Washington. So thanks so much, Katie, and I'll turn it back over to Ron to jump into the program.
Thank you, Andy. And I'm going to give some context for our discussion today before we get to our panel. But we really, as we look at the title of this session, this webinar, we have to dissect it a bit to get to some common understanding, partnering to build race-conscious manufacturing training programs. And you really can't talk about partnering unless you deal with the relational dynamics, not only in industry, but in the country right now. And in order to do that, we have to put things into some historical context and realize that the mere factors of production, land, labor, and capital, and the whole concept of race, how did they emerge, and how did we arrive to where we are right now? And I think that will lay a foundation for the discussion and the conversation that we will have, realizing that race as a social construct did not even emerge until the 16th century, when there was a need to have a rationale for the forced deportation of Africans to work in the Western Hemisphere. And what was driving that was the need for economic factors. And it really centered around land, labor, and capital. And a case in point for that is an article that appeared in Time magazine last year. In fact, it was July 10th edition. And the title of it was Facing America's History of Racism Requires Facing the Origins of Race as a Concept. And I'll just read a quick excerpt. It says, the logic behind the history of race initially seems deceivingly clear to justify the forced deportation of 400,000 Black Africans to North America and another 11 million to other parts of the Americas between 1525 and 1866. Europeans and their American heirs found it necessary to debase or revile their captives, yet today's racism is more than a malignant byproduct of the 19th century American plantation system. It also grew out of an elaborate and supposedly scientific European conception of the human species that began during the Enlightenment. So in order to deal with the whole notion of relational dynamics and partnering and to build race-conscious manufacturing training, we really have to take it there to its very basic concepts and talk about becoming more conscious, more aware, more transparent, more forthcoming about the concept and understand how it intersects with the economic dynamics of land, labor, and capital. So that sort of sets the stage for what we are going to discuss today. And the real question is, how do we do that as we move forward with the workforce needs that we find in manufacturing? In order to do that today, we have with us Katrina Crane, Director of Workforce Development and Business Solutions at Menomonee Valley Partners in Milwaukee. We have Hector Hueso, Senior Workforce Equity Coordinator at Jobs to Move America. Jason Drake, Executive Director, Workroom Program Alliance at Dan T. Moore Company, and Stephen Tucker, President and CEO of Northland Workforce Training Center in Buffalo. And each of them are going to take between 7 to 8 minutes, 7.5 to be exact, to describe their programs and to address the topic before we get into a more open dialogue and discussion around partnering for race-conscious workforce development programs in manufacturing. So we'll start with Katrina.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Katrina Crane, and I'm the Director of Workforce and Business Solutions for the Menomonee Valley Partners. Menomonee Valley Partners is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to revitalize the Menomonee Valley for the benefit of the entire Milwaukee community. And through those efforts, Menomonee Valley has many public and private partners. The Valley has undergone unprecedented growth in the number of companies that have relocated or expanded here, jobs that have been created here, and park areas that have been developed. And the work that we do, we have 5 strategic priorities. And today I'm going to focus on the area of workforce, which is connecting employers to a regional job-ready workforce. Next slide. The Menomonee Valley is in the heart of Milwaukee, dividing the city from its north side and its south side. The neighborhoods that rest on our bluffs are really densely populated and have some of the lowest income households in the city. MVP meets with its CEOs of its 150 plus businesses annually. And we learned about 6 years ago that workforce and building a connection to the local workforce was a priority. At any given time, 200 plus jobs are available in the district. Residents don't look for jobs the way they used to. Residents aren't going to job centers and looking for jobs the way they used to, or reading in the newspapers. Plus, roles in the manufacturing industry were not being sought as they once were, as the perception of those roles are quite different, as people are still thinking that they're dirty, dark, and dangerous. So we decided on a different approach. So MVP collaborated with the neighborhood organizations that are on both sides of our bluffs, which are near Westside Partners and VIA, and created neighborhood job events. What these did was bring job fairs directly into the neighborhood, walkable by the residents. And by bringing the recruitment events directly into the neighborhoods, the organizations helped connect to those companies. It helped connect to those residents. And it was just a new model of a job fair. Attendees received help filling out applications right there versus an online process that they didn't understand. Each attendee received on-site preliminary interviews. So they felt like they were connected to the employer immediately. It wasn't just a regular job fair. They were able to ask direct questions and learn about the types of positions that are available. We also made sure that our partners, which are the MATC Milwaukee Area Technical College and Employ Milwaukee, which is our local workforce development board, was there. And what they were there for was to make sure that there was a direct connection to training that is needed if a person didn't qualify for a job. We didn't want people to leave the job fair feeling like they weren't connected. Next slide. Employers are seeking to diversify their workforce to further aid employers are building a connection to Black and Brown workforce, Black and Brown workforce. We just launched what we call Job Up. And this partnership consists of Milwaukee Area Technical College, the YWCA of Greater Milwaukee, and two of our largest industrial bids here in Milwaukee, which are Haven Woods and my organization, again, Menomonee Valley Partners. The Job Up program provides a unique opportunity to connect entry-level students, which are young adults, to in-demand jobs, which are the jobs that have been hard to fill by those employers. While the student attends MATC to acquire the skill set the employer desperately needs, this is free of cost to the student and the employer. The person also works at that employer, earning a wage and getting that type of knowledge simultaneously. Once the employee graduates, they are now in a position to job up, moving in a more leadership role, and the cycle continues. We are also working to train and support managers with diversity and inclusion programming to help better support that new worker. Next slide. What you see here is a new program that we actually just developed. It was just launched recently as well, and it's called Building Equitable Leaders. It's the first program of that Job Hort program that we provide to the leaders of businesses so that they understand how to better work with their employees who may have various barriers to employment. What this does also is help those employees rethink how they frame policies, how they recruit employees, and to just overall understand racial concerns and as it pertains to maintaining a more diverse workforce. Next slide. Throughout the year, MVP always comes up with unique ways to provide additional training that supports all of our businesses, but particularly the small business to gain additional training for their staff. And our goal, of course, is still to focus on Black and Brown communities. This year, we're partnering with MATC, and we're applying for what we're calling a WAT grant, which again is a program that's allowing these employers to provide training at low or no cost to their current employee set. We do this as a district. So we built the training together as a cohort model. So this is also unique, where there's businesses who are competitors who are working together to develop this model in order to ensure that we're meeting the needs of building a Black and Brown strong community in the Menomonee Valley. Next slide. We also created what we're stating is called Valley Talks, and it's one of our newest circles for the business district. This, what it does is provide workers an opportunity that's quite unique. They're able to come to this circle and be in a place that it's a no judgment zone sounding board, affinity group, where they can discuss equity issues, things that they want to change at their workplace, just have a spot that you can come to once a month to discuss these things, but also to learn, educate yourself on what's happening in the community, and just share and get feedback. So it's something that's very unique, and so far it's been working out pretty well. Next slide. What we also created, maybe about 7 years ago, was the Discovery Career Initiative. And what this is our opportunity to showcase underrepresented careers, to our youth. So we partner with many of our local school systems, some of our local private and public school systems, to share with them these types of opportunities, from manufacturing to engineering, to like this one that we're focusing here is young women in commercial real estate. So what we do is we're bringing this program to our Black and Brown community and teaching them about opportunities that they didn't know existed. So it's a real cool opportunity for our high school kids to get connected to the jobs, and to understand what kinds of opportunities exist within the employers of the Menomonee Valley. Next slide. And that's it for me. I did that in 7 minutes. I'm shocked. But yeah, any questions that you guys have, I look forward to answering that after. But right now, we're going to pass it off to Hector.
Thank you, Katrina. As a recovering workforce development professional myself, I'm always inspired by the great work of connecting job seekers to businesses and educating them on these industries. So I'm excited to talk to you all today about the work of Jobs to Move America. Before diving into some of the specifics, I'd like to share a little bit about the work that we do, so you know who Jobs to Move America is. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Eva. We're a national nonprofit organization that works to build diverse coalitions everywhere that we work. And we're united behind the principle that public investment should result in good jobs, especially for disadvantaged communities. And for us, that has presented itself specifically, meaning targeted employment and training opportunities for women, Black workers and workers of color, formerly incarcerated workers, and veterans. We believe that instead of a race to the bottom for the least expensive products produced unsafely and overseas, we can harness the power of public spending to create good jobs in the US with family-sustaining wages and training programs. And this vision is especially important because public agencies spend a lot of money each year buying manufactured goods. I really appreciated the framing that we began this with because land, labor, and capital intersects with public spending and green manufacturing and infrastructure, and how we transition to a carbon neutral or carbon free economy. So we envision partnering for race conscious and justice focused training programs. That it has to include working with public agencies and working with the companies who compete for those public contracts. Next slide, please. I mentioned in the previous slide that we work in coalition everywhere that we do our work. I'm going to skip the part about how we build our coalitions and how we work together to focus on the two approaches that our coalitions take, primarily partnering with public agencies and partnering with major companies or manufacturers. With public agencies, we work to show them how to create the most good jobs with the kinds of purchasing and contracting that they have to do anyway. When an agency puts out a request for proposals, there is specific language and requests that for information that those agencies can ask companies to disclose, information about how many jobs will they be creating if they win this contract? How will they be training and recruiting workers from disadvantaged populations? Are there agencies or community partners that they'll be working with to make that happen? This information can be used to evaluate companies' bids so that job creation is as an important factor in scoring a proposal as technical expertise is, or cost, or other factors that go into evaluating those proposals. And so public agencies play a huge role in, can play a huge role in leveling the playing field, but there are limits to what they can do, especially when it comes to specific populations who we want to see get fair opportunities for hiring and training. And so to address that, we work with companies directly. We work to ensure that commitments that they have made to win contracts in the first place are real, that it's not just through a handshake and a wink, but through bona fide partnerships like community benefits agreements, which is sort of the primary tool we use to very implicitly spell out what are the priority populations that we want to see benefit from these jobs that are being created? What are the necessary supports that they're going to need to be successful? And how do we train a group of folks and address their training needs so that they can have access to jobs with family sustaining wages and benefits and skills training without a 4-year degree? And so this may sound a little high level, but on the next slide, I have a couple of examples of some successes that we've had. One is with BYD, an electric bus manufacturer in Los Angeles County that employs over 500 production workers building electric buses for transit agencies across the US. Through partnership with Jobs to Move America and the Sheet Metal Workers Union, who represent those workers, these employees enjoy a strong union contract, job security, safety practices, retirement benefits. And as a result of their relationship, BYD and the sheet metal workers have been able to develop the country's first electric bus manufacturing apprenticeship program with a local community college. They actually just graduated their first cohort in February. This has also helped make the company more competitive with transit agencies because they can tout that they're investing in good US jobs and training programs right here within US boundaries. On the policy front, our approach with municipal and state public agencies has an incredible opportunity to be at the center of this administration's Build Back Better approach to public infrastructure and public investment. One example is a very needed and long overdue campaign that Jobs to Move America is a part of to end the ban, the federal ban on local hire for federally funded projects. We're very excited that this is something that we're going to be working on to really transform how municipalities can use federal spending to create good jobs locally. And some folks have said that the approach that we're taking is what the Green New Deal is all about. So we're very excited to have the support of our work from the likes of Senator Bernie Sanders. But this approach is not without challenges. If we could go to the next slide, please. It's always inspiring to hear about how relationships are built locally amongst workforce partners, but it's to be expected that there's often a pushback from companies or from public agencies themselves. And so something to keep in mind is that something to keep in mind is that sometimes companies don't always see the benefits up front. And so it takes convincing and a coalition of folks to really turn that around. One example of that has been one company in particular who is experiencing lots of challenges with its workforce along racial lines. If we go to the last slide, please. I'm wrapping up. Some closing thoughts before we get to the discussion later on. It's always been helpful for me to remember what exactly is it that we are building? Is it short-term or is it long-term? And I'm reminded of this old adage of how important it is to go together if we're going to go far. But I think it's important to, for us and the folks on this call to consider that not all partnerships are created equally. Partnerships are not just the hallmarks of good business or for, disruptive innovators or, a result of the market. A lot of that expertise exists with practitioners locally. If Uber and McDonald's are partnering, they're screwing workers on both sides. So we need better examples of what partnership looks like. And we feel that that is really the way to build the solidarity economy, which means an economy that is working for working families and businesses, and stabilizing communities by putting people to work. To build that sometimes means having to fight for a seat at the table and to join with other groups and workers and coalitions to make that happen. So with that, I will now pass it over to Jason Drake for his presentation. Thanks all for the time.
Thanks, Hector. I'm Jason Drake, Director of Education and Workforce Development for the Dan T. Moore Companies, a portfolio of small to mid-sized manufacturing companies headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio, where we have about 1 million square feet of manufacturing space in the Collinwood neighborhood on the Far East Side. We also own and operate companies across the region, including holdings in Michigan, Indiana, and West Virginia. I also run our nonprofit. It's called the Workroom Program Alliance, or the WPA for short, an organization that Dan Moore and I founded in 2016 for the sole purpose of developing and delivering curriculum designed to rebuild a pipeline for underserved communities into local manufacturing companies that provide stable and family-sustaining career pathways. So this first slide represents where we started. We focused on certification programming that would provide students with stackable skills and credentials that create opportunities and on-ramps into manufacturing careers. Industry recognized certifications like an AWS welding cert, delivered in an intensive hands-on 2-week boot camp in partnership with Lorraine County Community College, empowered our students to envision careers they never before thought possible. And we did this while they were still in school. Programming like Manufacturing 101 and 102, courses we developed in partnership with Cuyahoga County Community College, provided students with project-based learning modules that introduced them to different kinds of jobs on the manufacturing floor, like fabrication, quality control, and even design. Once they graduated, we were able to help them develop relationships with local manufacturing companies, pursue paid internships, and eventually become full-time employees. Next slide, please. These next two slides represent where we're headed. We're working closely with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District to renovate underutilized portions of a 350,000 square foot, 100-year-old historically landmark high school that's just blocks from our factory in Collinwood. And our goal is to create the Greater Collinwood Community Career Center. Next slide, please. Our vision here is to create lab space and a technology hub that will help deliver the technical skills that students and adults from the community need to pursue jobs in machining, robotics, mechatronics, automation, and other in-demand jobs in local companies. Local companies have lost their connections to local workforce, particularly in struggling, predominantly Black and brown communities on Cleveland's east side. And our goal is to reconnect these communities to the manufacturers doing business in their neighborhoods. Some of these companies are big, like Lincoln Electric and Eaton, but most are mid-sized operations, and all are starving for talent. We see big upside for these companies and these communities in reestablishing these mutually beneficial bridges. Cleveland has surpassed Detroit as the poorest large city in the country with a close to 35% poverty rate, with highly concentrated poverty on the east side, with rates reaching as high as 80% in certain neighborhoods. So we'll also be pursuing partnerships with other community organizations who will provide the wraparound services that students and trainees need to succeed in the workplace. We want to be a one-stop shop for helping people overcome the barriers of cyclical poverty in the city. We believe that economic development in poor and underserved communities depends on small business development and sustainability. And small business development in manufacturing, in turn, depends on technical and entrepreneurial skills. That's what we hope the Greater Collinwood Community Career Center will help deliver to the Collinwood community, using a multi-generational approach to developing workforce, helping companies embrace earn and learn models like apprenticeship, and helping to create the business owners of the future. In terms of partners, we've chosen our partners very, very carefully. Many partnerships grew out of work in terms of organizing on education and workforce development, and lots of thought and due diligence went into accepting those board seats with organizations committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Relationships with educational partners were also done very deliberately. Building our relationships with higher ed partners only succeeded because we were able to find the doers at each institution on the administrative level, and then cultivating relationships with motivated faculty and staff. On the industry side, we're a player, so we know some, but we've also been involved with a membership organization of 200 plus small to mid-sized manufacturers for many years. So that was a relationship already in place for me, which was pretty lucky. Through our work with that organization, which is called Manufacturing Works, we've been able to recognize that the changes we need to make are not just on the workforce side, how we recruit, how we train, and how we develop skilled talent, but also on the organizational side of industry in terms of how company culture is expressed on the factory floor. Pursuing equity, diversity, and inclusion is an industry-wide effort and must be pursued as such. Organizations who are experts in social emotional learning and trauma-informed programming have been instrumental in giving us the conceptual framework and the language to be able to promote change within the companies themselves. In terms of what it's meant for us to build a racially conscious organization, that work was already being done at the Dan T. Moore companies long before I joined. That's always been Dan's ethos, and it's reflected across our portfolio of companies. Helping to develop and deliver programs and build infrastructure that help spread that ethos across our communities has been my sole focus for the last 5 years, and I hope we continue to do so for many years to come. I think in some respects, technology and COVID is forcing us to redefine what community actually means, but place-based redevelopment in our declining city centers must continue with a comprehensive understanding of the factors that led to that decline in the first place. And if we can address some of those underlying factors, connect communities to fair wages and career advancement, we can go a long way toward rebuilding our neighborhoods in healthy ways and allowing manufacturing to be that ladder to the middle class it's historically been. Thank you. That's all I've got, and it's on to Stephen Tucker.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Urban Manufacturing Alliance, Century Foundation, and Jobs to Move America for providing this platform and allowing us to share our work. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Tucker. I'm the president and CEO of the Northland Workforce Training Center. And the Northland Workforce Training Center is a brand new state-of-the-art facility located on the east side of Buffalo, designed to train and prepare local residents for outstanding careers in advanced manufacturing and energy. From the beginning, we focused on partnerships. We're financed through Empire State Development, which is the economic development entity in New York State, along with New York Power Authority, as well as the Buffalo Urban Development Corporation and the City of Buffalo. And it's a $65 million investment located on the east side of Buffalo, which historically has been an area that has been underutilized and didn't receive any investment over the last 50 to 60 years. Next slide, please. The east side of Buffalo, where we're located within the Northland Beltline area, used to be an industrial area located in the city of Buffalo that used to employ upwards to 5,000 people. But like many other Rust Belt cities, in the industrialization of many of those cities, the factories closed, the area deteriorated, and the jobs dried up. Based on an American Community Survey from 2015, the household incomes on the east side of Buffalo is $23,000 per household, which is about $8,000 less than the rest of Western New York. Next slide, please. However, the east side of Buffalo and these areas had great spaces that, if given the investment, could be transformed back into providing great resources and assets for members in the community. So from the beginning, our plan was to have a significant focus on placemaking, investing in places where we can have the biggest impact on people, and not only people, but people of color, women, marginalized populations, and individuals who have traditionally been left out of the renaissance that's currently taking place in Buffalo. And we were fortunate to be able to transform a space that looked like this 5 years ago into, the next slide, please. This today, brand new state-of-the-art facility where we focus and provide training through 2 SUNY institutions, leading to certificates and degrees. Next slide, please. The Northland Workforce Training Center is a collaborative partnership based off of best practices from across the country. And our vision is to be the premier model of a public-private partnership providing education and training, workforce development services that are industry-driven and employment-focused. Within our vision statement, there's a couple of key words I really want to focus on. Industry-driven. Everything we do is led and influenced by business and industry. We partner with the Buffalo Niagara Manufacturing Alliance, which is an industry association here in Western New York, consisting of 200 small, medium, and large-size manufacturers. Collectively, those companies employ upwards to 20,000 individuals. Right now, they have 3,000 job openings that they can't fill that remains open today. And we are projecting to need to fill about 20,000 job openings in the next 10 years, mainly due to retirements. Both the advanced manufacturing and energy sectors have an aging workforce and a non-existent pipeline. But from the beginning, the Buffalo Niagara Manufacturing Alliance knew that they couldn't operate a training center on their own. So they partner with great nonprofit community-based organizations that have more than 300 years of providing outstanding services in the community. Those nonprofit organizations were the Buffalo Urban League, Catholic Charities, and Goodwill Industries. And collectively, we rebirthed a dormant nonprofit called the Economic Development Group. So today, we are the Economic Development Group doing business as Northland Workforce Training Center. Next slide, please. Northland is uniquely designed to assist individuals 18 years or older to reduce all the major barriers that prohibit students from enrolling, completing post-secondary education, such as transportation, childcare, academic readiness, and affordability. And from the beginning, we focused on eradicating that transportation issue. Just based on where we're located within the city of Buffalo, we have access to public transportation. But we also provide intense wraparound services, providing students with bus passes. We have a shuttle service to get people back and forth to school as well as to work, in addition to those other services that I mentioned before with the child care, substance abuse, and mental health. And affordability. We assist all of our students with applying to college so that they can attend Northland Workforce Training Center at little to no out-of-pocket expense for those individuals based off of financial need. Next slide, please. We partner with 2 SUNY universities, and those of you outside of New York, SUNY stands for State Universities of New York, which is our higher educational system. Can you please hit the next forward? The first community college that we partner with is SUNY Erie. We have a 1-year certificate program for mechatronics technicians. We currently have about 72 students enrolled into that program. Next click, please. Alfred State College is another SUNY university that we partner with, and we have 3 programs. Next click, please. Offered here at the Northland Workforce Training Center. Machine tool technology. The next one. Welding technology. We have 2 more clicks, I believe, to get through this slide. Construction and maintenance electrician. We tell our students that they can expect to earn entry-level salaries between $30,000 to $50,000 a year. And once again, next click. Students could attend Northland at little to no out-of-pocket expense for those who qualify based on financial need. Although these are entry-level salaries from between $30,000 to $50,000 a year, students who graduate the program will now have a career pathway leading to upward mobility that leads to family sustainable wages as well as benefits. Next slide, please. At the Northland Workforce Training Center, we are responsible for the recruitment and assessment. We provide all of our students with a career coach and a student support team. We also assist students with financial aid counseling, meaning that we work with students to complete their financial aid and their applications for college. We provide 4-credit stackable training. We're about to launch apprenticeship programs as well. We embed intense wraparound services in the delivery of all of our training programs, as well as job placement assistance. We're held accountable for placing at least 75% of our students in jobs that earn family sustainable wage and provide those follow-up and supportive services for up to 3 years once they complete the program. Next slide, please. Our target populations include recent high school graduates, job seekers, unemployed, underemployed, veterans, minorities, women, returning citizens, immigrants, and refugees. But the most important bullet on this particular slide, in my opinion, is anyone interested in a career in advanced manufacturing and energy. Next slide. Our organizational goals, we want to enroll and train between 300 and 400 students annually. We have a completion goal of about 80%, which is super high, especially for marginalized populations. We want to place 75% of our graduates in employment opportunities. Again, we provide the post-placement follow-up services for up to 3 years. But the bigger component on this particular slide is serving as a catalyst to transform this neighborhood. Since we've made this investment, we've seen a restaurant come into the neighborhood now that we can offer quality food in the area. We're also negotiating a deal with the banking institution to provide financial services. So we really want to serve as a catalyst to transform this neighborhood. Next slide, please. We currently have 260 students enrolled. We have 53% minority representation, 8% female representation. Next slide, please. 32% of the students enrolled and participating in training at the Northland Workforce Training Center live in zip codes contiguous of 14211, which is where we're located. And 68% of the students attending Northland qualify for federal or state financial aid. Next slide. This is a slide of our mechatronics lab. So, well, I'm sorry, our CNC program. And the state provided us with about $6 million to purchase all brand new state-of-the-art equipment in alignment with our business and industry partners. Next slide, please. So additional benefits to the neighborhood in Western New York. I mentioned the 20,000 job openings projected in the next 10 years. We really want to increase the overall quality of the region's labor pool, but more importantly, fill a growing need of technically skilled workers for the advanced manufacturing and energy sectors. Again, we want to connect our graduates to jobs, providing them with family sustainable wages, moving them into the middle class. And if we're able to do this, which we have gotten off to a great start so far, we're at about a 77% job placement rate. Those individuals now will add about $6 to $8 million in wages back into our local economy. So with that, I will pass it on to Katie and to Andrew so that they can open up the conversation for the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Katrina, Hector, Jason, and Stephen. And now we'll transition into the questioning part of the program. And let me say this just before we do that. I have perhaps the coolest job in the world, 35 years in higher ed, 25 years at an HBCU, historically Black college and university in the heart of Baltimore, working on cool projects like this, the Industry and Inclusion Project. I get to think about all of these things. So a lot of the good learning happens in settings like this when we talk to the people who are in the application end of it and learning from sort of an action research kind of a frame. But I'll start out with this question, and any of you can jump in and answer it. But how have your organizations had conversations with partners around racial equity goals? How have your organizations had conversations with partners specifically around racial equity goals? And anyone can address that.
Well, I can start. As I am a part of a business improvement district, so I'm quite different than the other guys that has spoken today. And so we use the platform to speak about equity issues on a number of different fronts. One, we've pulled CEOs together. So again, as I mentioned in my presentation, there's over 150 businesses in the Valley. And we had a CEO opportunity where we had those CEOs actually talk about it once, together and share with us some of their concerns, some of their issues. And that's how we develop some of the programming that we have. We also have what we call a workforce circle. And there businesses who are HR managers or business owners are able to communicate with one another to share what some of their concerns and issues are. And over the past year, diversity and inclusion, equity issues have been on the forefront for everybody, and wanting to realize what we can do and how we can work together to impact that. So we're seeing businesses work together in ways that we've not experienced before. We're also seeing individuals who are stepping up and saying, you know what, I'm noticing certain things here at work that I want to work on, and and I want to do it as an individual for my team. So we're seeing a lot of that as well, and it's really good. So that's why a lot of the programming that we administer are on all different levels to make sure that we're hitting those different areas with each business.
Yeah, and I would like to add that we're fortunate to have a great relationship with our industry association, the Buffalo Niagara Manufacturing Alliance, as well as our educational partners, both SUNY Erie and Alfred State. With the Buffalo Niagara Manufacturing Alliance, the current representation of minorities in production jobs is less than 20%. Females in production jobs with their companies is less than 5%. They know that they have to have a different approach in terms of not only recruiting minorities and diverse candidates, but also supporting minorities and diverse candidates by creating a welcoming culture so that they can retain those candidates and help those candidates advance within their companies. But also, again, with the educational partners, I mentioned 53% minority representation of students, but the faculty of our current programs, we only have 2 persons of color and no females that are faculty members actually training our students. But our educational partners, especially at SUNY Erie, they've been open to recommendations and strategies. So I look forward to working with both industry and education with making sure that they have diverse faculty, as well as providing diverse or access to opportunities for diverse candidates to move into some of those roles.
I would just add, to Katrina's point, we've got some strong sector partnership efforts being undertaken in Cleveland right now, in manufacturing, IT, and healthcare. And all 3 of those kind of centralized efforts have included public conversations about racial equity and inclusion. So there's been a good kind of social discourse put in place by those sector partnerships that have allowed these conversations to become both much more common and much more productive across the board.
Okay, thank you. I want to go back to something that Jason, I think, mentioned, and it ties into one of Stephen's comments. When you were sharing, Jason, you talked about socio-emotional learning and trauma-informed programming and redefining what it means to be community and belongingness. And I think Stephen was speaking about having diverse faculty and the benefit of having diverse faculty. Can each of you talk about the importance of those? Why is it important to have diverse faculty in a training role? And what about creating this sense of community and belongingness? And what does trauma-informed programming have to do with that?
I'm happy to.
Well, just speaking from experience, what we saw when we were trying to place our students into manufacturing companies was that it was really the culture that was driving their decision making. And those companies that did approach employees with a feeling of respect and a shared kind of vision for moving the company forward, they were the ones where our students really predominantly decided to go work. And so, when we stepped back to look at how do we get companies that aren't used to thinking about this kind of thing into conversations about it, what we found was, the language of social emotional learning and a deep understanding of the trauma that cyclical poverty imparts to people who suffer it had to be a part of the conversation to contextualize, but also provide a framework forward for kind of what those conversations look like and sound like.
Okay, Hector, you were about to comment.
Yeah, I would add that something that we have seen as helpful in making trainees or new employees feel welcome has been incorporating sort of like affinity groups where workers of similar background can have time during the workday, maybe once a month, to workshop ideas. What are things that can change either at our facility or in training that would make the space more welcoming to women, for example, or would make the space more welcoming to formerly incarcerated employees. And so that's actually been a suggestion that we've been able to include in community benefits agreements that we've negotiated with companies, where they see the value in that as well as an opportunity for improvement and an opportunity to also attract more diverse talent. And so we've been able to use affinity groups to get at some of those issues, or to help brainstorm recruitment from specific populations, or even just to address workplace issues that they feel like they may be dealing with different from some other colleagues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, affinity groups are definitely helpful in terms of creating space where people can talk about shared experience. And Stephen, that whole notion of having diverse faculty, can you talk about the value of that or the benefit of that?
Yes, I think definitely, having the diverse faculty could serve as an inspiration and further support of minorities and people of color. Kind of like, you can't inspire what you can't see, right? We're considering creating a program to upskill or put Northland graduates on a pathway to eventually becoming faculty. But we've also worked with the faculty that we do have with diversity, equity, and inclusion training, cultural competency training, so that we can help them be able to relate better to diverse candidates.
Okay, thank you. Can one of you talk about a scenario where the conversation did not necessarily work out well, or it was more of a struggle than you anticipated, and you had to work through that to maintain and to build the relational connection? Have any of you experienced that, and how did you navigate that situation when the conversation may have been difficult?
So I just think first having those courageous conversations, and depending on the situation, having to elevate those conversations to the administration or the decision makers, where some tough decisions may have to be made. And we have had situations like that. And fortunately for us, our educational partners agreed with us and made those decisions to remove faculty, to change individuals, or to come up with different strategies to eradicate some of the challenges that we were facing. Yeah, and again, it's having those conversations. And if it is a conversation to where, you believe that something is justified or has to be done, making sure that it happens.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I can say that for us, I mean, it definitely, the programming that I was able to share with you guys today was not something that was just easily that came up. So initially, having those initial conversations with, various businesses was not easy. And especially after the George Floyd, like we did have companies that immediately reached out to us asking, like, how do we connect with our employees? What do we say? How do we make a stance? And we did help them through that. But at the same time, it was one of those things that many businesses were still unsure as to what they should say, what they should do. Does it, is there going to be concerns with other audiences? And so we had to we listened to all of those different things and develop programming in a different type of way where we could bring that to an audience and let them talk about it, where they didn't again feel that what was being stated could be used against them in any kind of way. And that was kind of why we also decided to do some of the Valley Talks and those initiatives to make sure that anyone who actually needed that platform could actually have it and not feel like they could not discuss these things at work, or that we could give them the tools to do so. So the training that we provide, as well as the affinity groups, help to do just that.
Okay, thank you. Providing the space where those conversations can happen and doing it in a way where people can work through the lack of comfort or the discomfort in having the conversation. More specifically, I mean, that requires relationship, maturing to a certain point, where there's enough trust in the room, trust in the relationship that you can do that. How did you build to that point to get to where you could have that kind of conversation that may be more uncomfortable?
I guess I can speak to that again. For me, it's one of those things that, again, being a part of a business improvement district, and I've worked here for about 15 years, that's one of the things that we looked at when it came to even creating the Job Up program. The reason that 2 business districts were chosen is because we have that trust. So I have the relationships with those businesses where they trust me, where they can share various things with me, and I'm going to help them solve those issues. I mean, I consider myself, my job is like a concierge. And so I have a track record with being able to share with them or take care of those needs. So they feel more comfortable with sharing some of those concerns that they may have so that we can build. And I truly believe that if we did not have that trust or that relationship, we wouldn't be at this point with the programs that we have.
And I'd like to add, following up what Jason said earlier, when he talked about shared vision and values and culture, it's about tapping into those, that vision, those values, that culture. And sometimes we have to make decisions to where if the values and the culture doesn't align, and if it isn't mutually beneficial for all parties, then we may have to look at a different relationship. And that has happened, right? Because not everybody's ready to embrace, some of those shared objectives. But for the ones that are, it's great to be able to have those courageous conversations so that we can improve and create access to opportunities for everyone.
Okay, we're going to be turning to questions from the chat in just a few minutes. But before we do that, have any of you had cultural competency training in your organizations? And one, when you have that training, do you see the behavioral changes, or do you see the concepts in the training transferring to the workplace or the shop floor or the manufacturing setting? Is that connection there? And how do you determine that there's transference, that it's actually happening, that there's actual movement in terms of behavioral changes and cultural changes?
Well, we're still in our infancy. We created our Building Equitable Leaders course in order to do that. So it is this opportunity for those who are in leadership to actually understand what some of the barriers are and things are within the workforce, looking at their overall policies and how they manage or communicate with their current workers. And we're determining that right now. I'm not saying, I mean, it's not an easy thing to understand how it translates back into the workforce and change. But those are some of the things that we're looking at now so that we can strengthen that program as it moves forward. So I'll be more than happy to share that once we get to that point. But I have to admit, it's something that we've been really thinking about. How do we capture the stories? How do we watch this blueprint as it moves forward? So it's a lot to really think about. And how do we actually capture that or create this quantitative and qualitative way of understanding if the program is actually beneficial to the businesses who are a part of it.
Yeah, and I would just add to Katrina's response that, you know, Jobs to Move America, we're very outwardly vocal about wanting to create opportunities for specific populations. And so at some point we decided and we understood that it was important for us to also look internally to see that our own organizational practices weren't replicating some of the you know, white supremacist behaviors that existed, that some of the organizations we worked with were encountering at companies or in hiring practices. And so what we did, something that I recommend that a lot of folks do when they look internally, is to dedicate you know, work time and resources to really assessing the organization, looking at your practices internally, looking at you know, your the hiring and pools of candidates that exist for your own organization, and what promotions and training look like internally as well. And I'm very proud to say that we've made it part of our strategic plan to address you know, racism and biases as it shows up internally. We've dedicated resources to learning together, to adopting plans of action to change our practices or update our practices, so that we're not replicating some of those toxic behaviors.
And I've also been a part of, you know, a couple of different organizations that have reached out and brought in outside facilitators for these kinds of internal audits, which I think increase the level of honesty that companies can get to about their own practices. And I've seen those processes work really well. You know, we're still in that kind of space with a bunch of organizations. And so, as Katrina said, I'm happy to report back where we get to. But you know, if companies don't feel comfortable doing that work themselves, or need to create or want to ensure that they're creating a safe space for people to have open and honest discussions, I would absolutely highly recommend it.
Oh, Ron, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. This is a moment in time when there's a lot of attention to racial equity questions and issues. And, you know, my question is, do you have a strategy for continuing that conversation or facilitating that conversation beyond this moment and building partnerships over the long haul? Have you thought about that? Do you have a strategy for that?
Yeah, we think about that every day. It's actually built into one of the key focal points and priorities in our business plan, even with the selection and the location where we're located. We're in a neighborhood that's 91% minority. And every year, the staff and the faculty, as well as some of our industry partners, we get together to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion, because this is a challenge that we've been facing in our country since its inception. And I think in order for us to start to move the needle in that area, we have to be intentional. We cannot just have a session and check a box. And that's why I was kind of trying to form my thoughts around answering your question. How do we measure the success of our DEI training? Because it's more than just that. But some of the things that I observed in our training, we had, members of different races actually talking to one another about questions that they feel comfortable talking about, which normally doesn't happen. So to respond to this particular question, I think we have to be intentional in terms of focusing on our DEI conversation and building into the fabric of the organization and the organizations that you're working with.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Katie if she would perhaps share some of the questions that have come into the Q&A.
Yeah, of course. So let's start with this one. And Hector, maybe I'll pick on you to answer it first, and then others can pop in. But a question from the audience: are any programs teaching and supporting union-based conversations to strengthen workforce rights?
That's a great question. Usually unions are the biggest advocates for union-based conversations, but I don't think that should discourage any of us on this call for also being advocates for that, primarily because I don't want to get too into the weeds, but throughout history, in time, currently now, we know that there's a lot of intimidation that often takes place whenever, especially big companies, get a whiff of any kind of a union discussion. And so something that we have actively tried to educate the businesses that we work with on is that, workers, it's important for workers to, and it's the law, it's for workers to be able to decide about unionization for themselves. And so something that we advocate for is that, a company that really respects workers' rights allows workers to have these discussions openly without retaliation or threat of closing or any of those illegal and dirty tactics that discourage unionization. So that's something that we've been advocates of, especially since, we're talking about disinvested communities and populations that haven't had full opportunity to participate in this economy. They're facing existing barriers outside of work. Are we really fighting for good jobs if we're also placing them in employment at places where their voice or their concerns aren't going to be respected? So I think it's incumbent on all of us to respect that is something that workers should be able to discuss openly and freely, that companies should be neutral to those discussions, because ultimately it's up to the workforce to decide if unionization is right for them. But if folks want to talk specific scenarios or chat with me about that offline, I'm always happy to discuss more.
Thank you, Hector. Another question we have is, can any speaker address the issue of workforce housing to the needs of the manufacturing sector? Are there any collaborative or partnership examples between housing advocates and manufacturers, or perhaps your own training organizations?
Well, again, where we're located, we were strategically placed there as far as a redevelopment model because of the amount of housing. Like the neighborhoods that are surrounding it's very densely populated. And again, there's a lot of low income households there. So the goal of our development was to always make sure that as workers are needed by the employers, that we are recruiting from that area, helping to strengthen the local economy. And so we created over the past couple of years to start doing that, opportunities where we had housing tours that are directly in the neighborhoods, that we do make connections to those housing resources so that employees actually know how to participate or how to learn more about those. Those organizations have also created incentives to get some of those workers into the housing that's nearby. A lot of the redevelopment that was done in the Valley helps to ensure that there's opportunities for walk to work options, in the use of the Hank Aaron State Trail and the use of biking and things like that. So we're constantly, actually, that was one of the reasons even we created the job fairs the way that we did, as a way to ensure that those residents who are local to us actually knew that these jobs were just underneath them. We are a valley, so many of them were just connected to us because, again, the street grid goes above us. And so building that awareness, and then also that that trust was important. I can say that in recent conversations, it's come up that maybe we should think about having housing within the district. Again, initially it was built in a way that we didn't have housing in that area because it's focused on manufacturing and ensuring that, you know, of course, what comes with manufacturing, the truck traffic and things like that. So you want to almost eliminate the housing resources. But as businesses are growing and growing at unprecedented rates, that conversation did start to come up. So we're often looking at how do we, again, meet the needs of what our businesses are asking about, but we're doing it in a variety of different ways in order to make sure that that workforce and that housing connection is definitely made.
Yeah, and one of our partners on the Collinwood High School project is the Greater Collinwood Development Corporation, the local CDC. And so we've had initial conversations with that organization about what we can be doing to be furthering the affordable housing, quality affordable housing in the neighborhoods, because we too are pursuing a model that helps solve the problem of transportation and recreating walkable communities. And so the housing side of that equation is something that we're considering right now. We don't have a plan forward in place yet, but happy to share when we do get there.
You're really queuing yourselves up for a second webinar here, guys. So we're going to have to follow up on that. Any other answers to that housing question before I move on? Okay, great. Another question is, it seems like your programs often focus on entry-level jobs. I think we've heard of a couple examples where we're now thinking of, you know, how do they become trainers themselves or faculty? But is there any work being done to make sure that the trainees have viable career paths? The comment is, if you start an entry-level job but don't see like a path upward, it can be discouraging.
Yeah, here in Buffalo, we're really trying to implement a systems change idea, basically moving from programs to pathways. Instead of offering programs in individual silos, developing a system where we have career pathways with multiple entry points, multiple exit points to train the workforce. And it could be, you know, a 1-year certificate leading to a 2-year associate's degree, leading to a 4-year degree as one pathway, or an apprenticeship program where a student starts as either a youth apprentice or an apprentice. They complete their on-the-job training, the really technical instruction, become a journey person, and still advance in their career. And one particular program that we're about to launch here at the training center at Northland is a mechanical engineering technology degree program in collaboration with SUNY Erie that will prepare folks directly for industry. However, if they want to continue their education with one of our partner SUNY schools, either University of Buffalo or Buff State, for a 4-year engineering degree, we're working on articulation agreements to be able to connect those students to those opportunities as well. So we really want to support students in gaining those entry-level skills so they can get into the pathway, but also creating those career pathways so that they can advance. And we believe the apprenticeship model is one of the ways to do that.
Our job up model was developed to do just that. And so we just launched it just a month ago, actually, to our businesses. But the goal of the program was to start a person in an entry-level position that was an in-demand position at one of our local companies, with the goal that once they complete their 2-year certificate, so it's like a co-op model, they're going to be working at the employer, getting on-the-job training while they're in school at Milwaukee Area Technical College and getting their credentials that are needed. And at the end of that, when it's completed after that 2 years, that person will level up. So it's called job up because they will job up once they receive those credentials. And it's creating that cyclical opportunity where we're constantly building individuals that are from the Black and Brown community into middle management roles. And the goal is, again, to constantly build that pipeline. But the other side of the program that I didn't speak to earlier was finding someone who's currently in the workplace, who's kind of in a dead-end job where they can't move. This program will also provide a credentialed program for that person. So their years of working at that place can be quantified to determine like what classes they can skip because they've had on-the-job knowledge for so many years. So now instead of going to school for another 2 years, they may only have to go to school for 1. And again, it's paid for through the programming through Milwaukee Area Technical College, and that person too can level up. So now they can go into maybe a higher level management position. But the goal is to kind of change from, that what people see when they come in that middle management to upper management positions, and giving those individuals that skill set that's needed to level up in each one of those areas. So that's the goal for that program.
I think it's important to, one of the things that we've experienced as a manufacturer is that a lot of employers, like ourselves, are unwilling to put new employees into an apprenticeship program right away. And so there needs to be, an on-ramp for that transition. So what we're looking at is not just supplying semi-skilled labor in the place of entry level, but also helping companies develop plans for employee development and what that looks like and how that works, and either formal or informal. But a lot of manufacturers are experiencing the problem that they don't have the bench right now to be able to move people from general labor into an apprenticeship track. And so, I think we need to address that problem on both sides of it. Building the pool of talent, as well as teaching companies how to develop their talent well.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Jason's comments, a lot of the companies that Jobs to Move America works with are kind of at the forefront of battery electric technology. So they're not just manufacturing buses and bodies, but they're also pioneering charging and battery technology. So it's a real issue on two fronts. One, preparing workers for adapting to fast-paced changes in technology, and how do you maintain the ability to adopt as an entire company when new technology is pioneered. But also, how does that in turn turn into a longevity for the company, or a way for the company to diversify or grow its offerings to different sectors. We work with transit bus manufacturers. Some of the companies we work with are now looking at battery electric, heavy duty construction vehicles like excavators and things like that, because the battery technology is getting there. And so how do you train workers for retrofitting or adapting battery technology to new applications? And so similarly, we think apprenticeships are a great way to do that, and customized training with the help of local community colleges for the certification are great partners for making that happen.
Thank you all for answering that. Maybe you have time for one or two people to answer this last question and then we'll wrap. Last question is, what sustainability practices are any of your programs implementing into your program developments? Anyone want to tackle that one? Y'all got shy all of a sudden.
I can quickly say we're looking forward to phasing out gas and diesel buses. That's really what we're working towards when we're doing our work. So hope to keep that momentum going.
Great. Well, thanks for all the good questions from the Q&A. Ron, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Katie, and thank you all, Katrina and Hector and Jason and Stephen, for sharing the information, sharing their experiences, helping us grow. Also, Andy, would you like to make any parting comments before we sign off?
Well, I just, one thing that really occurs to me is that we know these are, I want to say, courageous conversations that you've had, with people in your community about driving towards racial equity. And I'm just always so impressed by all the investments, that you're making in these different cities, LA, Cleveland, Buffalo, Milwaukee. And it's really something I think, that needs to be modeled and replicated, in other places, and hopefully have some big opportunities, to do that over the next coming years. So thank you all, for your partnership, and thanks to a great audience today with a lot of really fantastic questions. We're looking forward to continue to engage in you and sharing these lessons. And I know all the panelists here, will be, more than happy to reach out and communicate with you, whatever city you're in, if you're looking to do something similar of note.
Okay, thank you. With that, I think that concludes our webinar for today, and we want to thank Urban Manufacturing Alliance, Century Foundation, Illumina Foundation for pulling this all together. And thank you very much. And we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to see
Thank
you
you.
all. Have a good afternoon.